For the purpose of my subculture presentation, I focused on adult non-traditional students. According to the AACNU, the term non-traditional is no longer exclusive to adult students, which are individuals over the age of 22, but encompass all students who have dependents, are single parents, are employed full-time, are financially independent, are enrolled in part-time studies, or do not have a high school diploma. This group shares the common reality of having multiple roles and responsibilities in addition to being enrolled in school. So, why is it important to study adult and non-traditional students? Studies show that 38% of students are now over the age of 25, with a quarter of those students being over the age of 30. More now than ever before, there's an increase in adult students, or non-traditional students as they're commonly known. Out of the 17.6 million undergraduate students enrolled, 75% of those students fall into the category non-traditional. This number is expected to grow as the need for professional degrees becomes increasingly necessary in the workforce. In terms of identity development, adult learners and non-traditional students also tend to develop differently as their role as a student is taking place after or in the midst of major life changes, whereas 18 to 22-year-old students, their schooling's happening really prior to major life changes. Colleges typically function to cater to the 25% of students between the ages 18 to 22 who live on campus, but a rise in adult students creates an impetus for campuses to rethink academic courses and institutional programs. In terms of my observations, I wanted to summarize them by focusing on some of the major themes and challenges, as well as strengths that I noticed in this group. So both students I interviewed were students with multiple roles and identities, as are all of adult non-traditional students. They were both parents. One was a spouse. One was living with his parents. They were both employees, and they also had the role of being friends with other people. There was a common theme or a common challenge of finding time management difficult with managing their multiple roles. There was also the challenge of financially investing in school in the midst of other life commitments. Another common theme was the transition of entering back into school, which brought with it the challenge of learning how to be a student again and managing coursework and studying and the reading, basically all of the assignments that come with being a student. In the midst of the challenges, there were also a number of strengths I observed in this population. Adult non-traditional students tend to be more self-motivated to finish their homework and to study. They have the experience of managing multiple roles, so they tend to exceed when needing to add a student to their list of responsibilities. Another strength in this group is the determination they have to finish their program, which leads to higher retention rates on a year-to-year basis for our institutions. There's typically more at stake for adult students, so their determination tends to be higher. One final observation I found interesting was the difference in perception between how adult students view themselves and how educators tend to view this population. While non-traditional students typically feel behind the times or underprepared, educators believe these students have valuable perspectives and life experiences that enhances the educational experience for all students. While most student development theories apply to a population of 18 to 20-year-old students, there are a variety of theories that directly relate to adult non-traditional students. Alexander Aston's theory of student involvement is applicable to this population because of the ways it discusses student engagement on campus. According to this theory, student input and investment paired with a favorable campus environment creates positive outcomes. Positive outcomes, both qualitative and quantitative, include developmental growth, academic success, and increased social networks. George Koo writes, because they live on campus, they have a better access than their commuting peers to institutional resources for learning, including faculty members and other students. In addition, full-time students tend to have fewer obligations, such as family responsibilities and off-campus work, that preclude them from taking part in certain educational activities, such as study abroad or extracurricular events. This theory applies to adult and non-traditional students because it gives some inclination into the challenges adult students face concerning connection in academics. Oftentimes, adult students assume the reason they are having a hard time with academics is due to their age, which in some instances may play a contributing factor. However, student involvement theory suggests that often students who are not engaged socially and within proximity to resources are not as prepared to succeed as those who are involved. This creates a need for campuses to find ways in which non-traditional students can still have opportunity for involvement and access to resources amidst their multiple social roles. Another theory I found applicable was Nancy Schlossberg's transition theory. As students make the transition into education, it's beneficial for both the student as well as the institution to think through the different resources needed, both internally and externally, to ensure the student can and will succeed. For students, they may need to re-examine the self to see if they have the characteristics necessary to achieve, such as multitasking abilities or the drive to complete tasks. They may also need to evaluate their support networks, such as family and friends, to determine if, with the help of others, they can fulfill all of their roles. Brenda had to rely on her social networks to help care for her son. And in my interview, I saw that Brian had to make the decision to move in with his parents in order to afford going back to school. For both of these individuals, without the supports of their networks, their education may not be possible. Schlossberg's theory also suggests a closer look at strategies will allow students to respond and make adjustments based on the challenges they experience. More often than not, strategies are a result of scheduling conflicts between life and commitments and the flow of the academic calendar. These are all different categories that adult students must address and take into consideration in order to assess the situation of transitioning into school. I'll now look at some of the implications of this subculture group based on my observations and the research that I did. What are the implications of all of that material for institutions? So based on the research and interviews conducted, there are several apparent needs of the adult non-traditional student population. According to Benshoff, adult students need help in building their self-confidence as students, in acquiring or refreshing study skills, and in managing their time and other resources while in school. In addition, adult students benefit from opportunities to interact with their peers and need to be actively involved in the educational process through sharing their relevant work and life experiences. Based on Benshoff, there is both a practical and theoretical element to helping this population of students. One involves building practical skills, and the other involves reframing the ways in which students see themselves and their abilities. Support in both of these areas, paired with a greater involvement of adult learners, will enhance the educational experience of each student. In addition to affecting the overall institution as a whole, there are also implications that have a direct impact on student affairs professionals who are seeking to connect students to opportunities. For adult non-traditional students, it may be beneficial to offer more weekend or evening opportunities, specifically in terms of course offerings. These students may also benefit from increased academic support and access to greater career counseling and opportunities. It may also be beneficial to have a separate orientation for non-traditional learners, as the resources they'll need to access and the times they are available may differ from on-campus learners. Changing some of these programs will also require adequate training for the professionals involved so they feel prepared to interact with non-traditional learners. They will need to learn how to draw upon the strengths and experience of adult students and also teach basic study skills to offer support that will help them to succeed in the long run. Rethinking these areas are a few ways in which institutions can better equip and support adult students, which in turn will benefit the overall institution. So based on the information I presented, as well as some of the observations that I found, adult and non-traditional students are an important population for student affairs professionals as well as institutions to understand and be able to shift some of the ways that they operate to offer better support. I will conclude my presentation with a quote from NASPA. It says, "An increasing proportion of today's students are adults who have been learning all of their lives. Many have significant life experience before college, such as marriage, divorce, blending families, work, unemployment, paying bills, caring for relatives, coping with loss, and travel abroad. And their life experiences have taught and changed them. All of them continue to live lives outside of college itself. These trends, familiar in 2-year institutions for decades, are now commonplace in 4-year colleges and universities as well. Graduate and professional students have exhibited many of those characteristics all along as older and returning students. Their disciplinary preparation and their experiential learning as adults have always been integrated, whether or not our institutions recognized and responded to that reality, and our universities are just beginning to assess, understand, and address their needs as learners. As long as a systematic process exists for developing and communicating knowledge, critiquing knowledge, and assessing what it is learned, learning situated in their life experience can be, but too often is not, brought into the college experience. In summation, with a greater understanding of the challenges and strengths that lie within the adult non-traditional student population, academic and student affairs professionals are able to create and administer courses in a way that supports the unique situations of this subculture. At the same time, programs can be structured in a way that draws upon the strengths that lie within a group that is coming to college with life experience and who are balancing multiple roles. By doing so, institutions are not only supporting adult learners, but they're giving on-campus students the opportunity to learn from their peers, which will enhance the overall educational experience for all involved. So that concludes my presentation on adult non-traditional students. I hope you found the information helpful and began to think about ways that you could apply the information presented to your specific branch of higher education in order to address and serve this subculture group.